once again. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining the Intergenerational Dialogue as part of the Youth Consultative Meeting. We are happy and honored today to be joined with Godi Alcamida, the WEG SPP Bureau Chair, Tisa Goversa, the Principal Coordinator of WEG SPP Secretariats, Jacqueline Alvarez, Chief of Chemical and Health Branch in the Industry and Economy Division at UNEP, Zuhair Kaushik, the Global Vocal Point of the Children and Youth Major Group to UNEP, and I'll be moderating. I am Asil Abu Talib, the Chemical Waste and Pollution Facilitators at the Children and Youth Major Group. So to start with a very brief update of what we have been doing since this afternoon. We had a very fruitful meeting and discussions, including capacity building session on the WEG process, with the inclusion of updates of the existing key policy. And one of the things to be highlighted here is that during the discussions and listening to the updates from our colleagues, we have been hearing a lot of mentioning of this year we had the first delegation to the BRS, youth officially represented. This year it was the first time to have youth engaged with the Vienna Convention and Montreal Protocol as official observer for the first time in the 36 years history of the process. First time to have youth delegation to UNEP Nitrogen Working Group. First time to have YCM prior to WEG process in person, and a lot of first time, and that was kind of inspiring us, motivating, and to have even more inclusion and participation. So we would be having a couple of questions to our guest speaker, and after that we can collect some questions from the participants, whether online or in person. So very briefly to start with, I have the very first question to the chair. So as the Bureau Chair of the WEG SPP, how do you envision fostering effective intergenerational engagement within the domain of chemical waste and pollution, ensuring balanced perspectives and expertise across different age groups and different stakeholders?
Thank you, and thank you first of all for inviting me. I must admit that the name of the session, Intergenerational Dialogue, makes me feel quite old now. I'm sorry about that, but I hope that my mind is still able to catch up with you. Thank you for your question. So I'm not entirely sure whether I'll be able to give a full answer to the question, because I think you frame it around within the chemicals and waste and pollution sphere, whereas I think where I would be for this session maybe more comfortable to talk about how this can be promoted in the context of the Science Policy Panel on Chemicals, Waste and Pollution, for short. And I would like to refer to an interesting discussion that we had this morning in the informal consultations, where I think we try to facilitate exchange between member states around questions around what are the key considerations for the panel to be established, in particular around what is kind of put underneath the institutional arrangement, which is all have to do with the decision-making bodies, the expert committees, but also who will be, in the secretariat, and also questions around how to deal with stakeholder engagement in general in the different roles that the panel will engage with stakeholders. So you can imagine that the science policy panel will have, let's say, a plenary where decisions are made. So then the question is, so what is then the role for stakeholders that are not member states or selected experts to participate in that? You can imagine that it is also around how to, give a role or how to select experts that participate in the panel in the different roles of the panel, and possibly also around who is the panel working for? So who are the clients and what are the relationships with the different MEAs or with member states, or who can ask questions for the panel in terms of what they want to address? And if I'm thinking, so I'm really speaking now from my personal capacity, if I'm looking at those discussions, I think a couple of things were mentioned by quite a few member states. So when you're talking about, for example, engaging with stakeholders in the decision-making body, and you would allow non-member states to participate in that, then I think the words that were used were making sure that there's inclusivity, but also diversity. And I would tend to think that this is something that applies across the board. But I think this is also something when you talk about or think about youth participation, in that perspective, you might also want to make sure that also your youth participation is inclusive and diverse in terms of the different areas of expertise that people can bring in, from a youth perspective, in terms of the different regions they represent, the gender they represent, and there's probably also a couple of other points that you want to make. So if that discussion is happening in the contact group, I think what you should be thinking about is how can we in this discussion also bring in a consideration on how to make youth part of that, discussion around inclusivity and diversity. For the experts, I would tend to think it is similar. Making sure that not only renommated, old, maybe even white scientists are, part of the equation, but you make sure that, you argue for the need for also young, maybe more innovative scientists to be part of that discussion. Possibly also because I think the discussion will also be around what types of knowledge will you need in your expert. So you can look at the, let's say, the traditional scientific areas that you need to have represented depending on what type of product that you are working on. But the discussion is also around how to include also traditional or local or indigenous knowledge, where I think also most likely within your group, you will have representatives working on that. And then maybe a last point, if that's okay. I think what is also then important is if you want to make, in a way, the panel's products relevant for young people, then I think there's also a need to think about how can you get the voice of youth being considered. How can you bring a youth perspective on the table in terms of being able to ask questions to the panel for them to consider taking up in their work program. So I think these are a couple of things that you might want to consider. So it's more maybe pointing to some of the areas rather than giving you a full answer, but yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much for answering the question. And what I can envision is that the floor is open, and we just will try one of the question. I will be redirected it to Zuhair as well to further explore potential engagements in this round of question. Yeah, thank you so much for your info and insights that will be taken into considerations, and we will try also to utilize and build upon this. Tiza, I have one question for you. It's also somehow in this sense of general formats. So in your role as the principal coordinator, how can the secretariats actively encourage the participation of both experienced experts and the younger generation to create a dynamic and inclusive discussion? Somehow similar question, but we would like to get your perspective on that.
Thank you very much for the question. And first of all, also thank you very much for inviting us. I think it's great that you invited us, and I think it's even greater that this group is so extremely active. Now you've been making submissions. You just gave an overview of where you have been focusing your discussions. You've been attending as delegates some of the key meetings in the chemicals and waste sphere. So I have to say that's very impressive, and I'm not new to UNEP. So no, it's really good to see, and thank you also for reaching out and engaging with us. So likewise, very happy to engage with you. Like Uri, I also felt a bit like, okay, I'm probably on the wrong side of the intergenerational kind of dialogue then in terms of age, but it doesn't feel that way. Actually, this is something that is rather close to my heart. I'm sure we'll get to that at some point. If not, I'll let you know at the end of the session today. But in terms of your question, so I think what you're doing is exactly the way to engage. If you specifically look at this kind of processes that are ongoing now and the openness working group, there's these opportunities. You can make submissions, you can express your views on documents that have been prepared. There are regional meetings, and you have been making sure that your voice was there, and I've heard your voice. So beyond the open-end working group, I think it's also good to realize that I guess a lot of you might actually be studying or working in areas which are related to managing chemicals, waste, there is, of course, a stage of developing and designing the panel that we're in now, but then the panel needs to be up and running as well. And I think it's very important in the design phase that we think forward what that means, and also think about, okay, who do we need to engage then? And I think this is a panel that is requested because we need solutions to the pollution problems. And if we need solutions, we need also the people who can bring those solutions, who have the new ideas, who know the latest science and knowledge, who maybe can also give some forecast that we don't make certain choices which turn out to be not the right choices, regrettable substitutions of chemicals. We've seen that in the past. So it's very important that these dimensions come in. So as the panel is going to do its work, it's also very important that you anticipate potentially participating as experts. And that doesn't necessarily mean holding the pen. No, it also can be review. There's zillions of people involved in these processes, whereby the aim is really to get an authoritative voice on the table. So that would be, I guess, my answer. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. And now I'm being curious about why intergenerational is close to you personally. We'll look forward to get more information about that. My next question is directed to Jacqueline Alvarez. I think she's joining us online. And yep, great. And my question would be for you from the position of your leadership at the Chemicals and Health branch. So how can organizations like UNEP, as also the governing and like the home of environment related in processes and topics, facilitate collaboration between senior professionals and young voices who are beyond, who are like young individuals, researchers, early career professionals, in terms of addressing the intersectionality between health aspects and the chemical waste pollution impact on communities. So that is my question for you.
Hello, I don't know if you can hear me. I'm not in a very good location. Just confirm if you can hear me, please.
Yes, you are audible. Yes, we can.
Yes, no, thank you very much for the question. And maybe I will start by saying that this is a joint endeavor. And in reality, you are asking how UNEP can, in a way, promote the intergenerational dialogue and discuss and go beyond. I think it's a two-way situation where we are in at this moment. For us, it's also a quite new process that we are engaging in. Therefore, we need your voices, the voices of the youth, but also the voices of those that are not that young in this process, to learn from their experiences, but also to see what has not happened and should happen. And that is for us something unique from you, because you are not only a new generation because of your age, but you are a new generation because of the way you have learned things, the way technology has approached you. And those are the elements that we need to hear from you. The panel needs to talk to you as well. It's for policymakers, and sometimes we tend to think that policymakers are governments, and that's very correct, but it's not only that. Policymakers can be at the industry level. It can be those that are guiding communities. It can be those that are, in a way, working in academia and universities, guiding the curriculum, guiding the questions that needs to be asked. But we are, in a way, the world in general, very good at understanding what the problem is, but sometimes finding the solutions is not what we do the best. Or if we do find them, then we are stuck because of the implementation, the feasibility, the funding, the approaches. Therefore, you are in a unique place to help us, UNEP, but at this moment, to help the process create something that it is useful for you, that talks to you. So we are targeting, and you might have read the assessments, the documents, assessments, but it's not only that type of things that the panel can deliver upon. So think with us, what are those things that talk to you? And I'm sorry, I got distracted because of the mic here, but I'll close, and I hope you heard me well. Thank you.
Yes, we heard you very well, and thank you for your answer. And now I would. Yes, hi.
Hi, so my name is Sheila Agarwal Khan, and I head the Industry and Economy Division in UNEP. I wanted to just add a little bit to what Jacqueline said. So I've just been in the Consumer International Global Congress, and it was a really interesting discussion about consumer information. And we were discussing in there, is there an interest, for example, in having a global kind of an ISO standard which would exist for how products are labeled? So if I think of my own kids, they say, well, we want to know what are the chemicals in the cosmetics we're using. And they have this little app called Think Dirty, and, they're all looking at it. And so I put to the Congress, I said, but, every label is different in every country. And you see all these ingredients, you don't know what it is. I think 2 days or 3 days ago, there's been a banning of formaldehyde in hair straightening creams. And because of cases of Black American women who have increasingly been found to have endometrial cancer in the US. And you think, well, the labels probably had formaldehyde, but who was using that would have known that actually you are increasing your risk of a cancer. And so the labels are wrong, right? At the end of the day, they're just telling you this ingredient and that ingredient, and they're not giving you any information on the environmental impact, its greenhouse gas impact, its pollution footprint, its health risks. And this is just one example. Imagine the flurry of examples there are. Your voice in wanting to have labeling, which will mean eventually not for this this science policy panel, but probably for the plastics agreement, probably in the global chemicals framework being implemented, in how the global biodiversity framework gets implemented, your voice becomes very important because you are consumers just like us. And so, but the younger voice is, I think, going to be important. A second issue I wanted to raise is there are a lot of chemicals where we're seeing, let's just take chemicals in plastics and chemicals. This panel could become the panel for that the plastics treaty looks at. We don't know. But imagine a situation where when we look at the health impacts, there are a few studies here and there, but not enough to say, oh, if you have microplastics in your body, you're going to have health impacts. Yes, with certain chemical additives, probably you're going to have health impacts. But you have a situation where some actors across this value chain are saying, well, actually, there's not enough evidence of health impacts. But WHO's data, for example, shows all of us have microplastics. You are the younger generation. You will have the next, God knows how many years ahead of you, where you will see the impacts of what it will do 20, 30 years. So are we going to have a tobacco story where we're going to say, you know, oh, there was no impacts, and then 30 years down the line, when non-smokers start to get cancer, we suddenly wake up to it. So exposure for us is a serious issue. It doesn't have to wait till we start to see cancers and all. Exposure alone is an issue. So do you want to bring things like that into the thinking of the panel, that it's not just health issues, but exposure issues? So think about it from this point also, because you have years ahead, years in which you could be sick. And so you need to think, do you want good labels? Do you want to look at exposure data? What are the kind of questions that we might not be thinking about? And we're just thinking, oh, this chemical, this criteria, but here's the chance to look at prioritization and all this, which are going to come into this panel. And you might want to bring that into the space. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sheila, for these additional insightful points. And I totally agree with you. And also to share with you, we had as part of the consultative meeting this morning, we also discussed on how we are getting into the era of EI and the information and you know, the challenge of getting bombarded by a lot of misinformation. So labeling is a very important issue, and also having precautionary principles and understanding the impact. So we had one of the questions raised during the discussion is that how can youth and other stakeholders at a country level contribute? And so we were also trying to find possible avenues for the bottom-up approach, considering some of the recent trending things and how are the things that are trending are attracting the attention. So attracting people to the chemical waste pollution has been also challenging, while people are focusing on somehow other processes in some way or the other. But it's a kind of a combination between sharing awareness and getting everyone on board. So that was very insightful. Now I have a question for Zuhair, and my question is also a redirection of Goody's question in terms of how do you see the role on behalf of CYMG perspective of youth influencing and contributing to the panel and the decision-making processes, especially to like what kind of methodologies can be implemented to amplify the impact?
Yeah, thank you. And thanks for, giving me the opportunity to sharing the perspective from the Children and Youth Major Group. Yes, I mean, a lot of strategy can be implemented. We can learn from the previous panels. I mean, in this morning, I was talking about let's learn from the previous panels, the existing ones, and learn from their limitations and backlogs. What some of the panels could not engage with the youth expert, and how they have limited the participation of different stakeholders. For instance, IPCC, they present great reports, but sometimes the people on ground, they don't understand. But GEO, at the same time, their reports are very much, connected to the social realities, where young people, for indigenous people from different stakeholder groups, they publish different versions, and we can literally get from there and we can understand. Here, one thing that we need to remind is that young people is a very diverse group. This is not a homogeneous group, though we are organized in our major group, in a single major group, but this is a very diverse group, even more diverse than any other stakeholder groups. We have indigenous youth, we have young people, from the LGBT community. We have young people who are, from working on ground, community people, local authorities. I mean, we have experienced that in our even work. We have a lot of young people. So the strategy is that first we need to understand and we need to recognize the diversities and the intersectionalities of the stakeholders that we have, and giving them the seats, giving them the power they deserve, not making them just the observers. But in many processes, like for the WEG, the observers has a very big role played. We have the chair, we have the coordinator who are engaging with us, we have Sheila who are coming to us and listening from us, sharing her thoughts. But it's not the common, it's not the same for the other processes. For instance, INC, it's a very different landscape. So yes, for the future panel, we should have a mechanism where we give them the power, bring them in the different bodies of the panel. Like for instance, we always promote geo model because this has a very good stakeholder engagement model, like from their highest, the top body, the IMAG, from MESAG, from the youth fellows, from different groups. They have seats from different constituencies, constituent groups. For instance, for the IMAG, they have a seat for youth, which is kind of the highest decision-making body. For the MESAG, the multidisciplinary expert group, they have a youth expert. They have 1 or 2 youth experts. And most importantly, this panel is going to be the most diverse panel so far, because this is going to, address chemicals, waste, and different kinds of pollution. This is not a one stream. This is a very diverse streams. We have to bring together people from the health community, from the people who are working on the hardcore chemicals issues, on the waste related issues, who are working on the waste management on ground, maybe the local authorities. So that's the thing we need to understand. And secondly, regarding the participation, we understand that in every hall, every room, we have a limitation of seats. We cannot have 100 youth here in the plenary. Or maybe 100 women, but to make sure that we are following the constituency model. If we build the process on the individual observer model, then we are actually discounting the opportunity to have the collective voices. But if we have a collective mechanism, if we follow the unified engagement mechanism, which is we have the major groups, we can create other stakeholders for the future panel. We can create a community, a constituency for health workers. We can bring them in under the constituency and give them the power to self-organize themselves and provide inputs. That mechanism, I think, should follow. It's not just for youth engagement, it's a meaningful engagement of all civil society stakeholders.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I'm considering the time. My second round of questions were meant to address the future science policy panel, but that somehow got addressed in some of the responses. So before opening the floor for questions for the participants, either online or in person, I would just have one very last quick question in terms for Guri, Tissa, and also Sheila, in terms of how do you, let's have it as a somehow advice in the sense of the intersectional period. How do you envision even fostered collaboration between the stakeholders and your side?
Thank you for that question. I'll just take it first, Tessa, if you're okay. No, I think that's a very good question. If you allow me, I was meanwhile also listening, and I had a couple of thoughts. We had in the INC process, we had a youth delegate in our Dutch delegation, and so I'm listening to you. I actually think you can also think about, can we also spur an intergenerational dialogue within the different constituencies of the different stakeholders, but also maybe continue to promote member states to take on board youth delegates. So in our case, it was helpful because not only we gave the delegation also a role in thinking with us in forming the position. So they influence in that sense directly our position. And at the same time, during the meeting, the person had, well, actually worked with you to, develop a youth position in the INC process. So it is bringing out kind of, those two things, which I think is really healthy. That you that you have also within the different constituencies such a discussion. So that is maybe something that you could also think about. Then with regard to your question, I do think it is useful to think about between now and the next meeting, how can we make better use of the intersessional period to facilitate exchange between the different members. I think, in my view, that is a little bit due to various reasons what we lacked, and what turned out to be very fruitful this morning when we had the engagement in the informal consultations. And I would offer to, once the week continues, to take a bit of time either during the meeting or after to consider how we can use the intersessional period also to, discuss a bit on how we can make useful use of picking your brains in a way, but possibly also allowing you a new space to, raise some issues that are, crucial for you, that we can then early in the process think about on how to kind of carry them forward, going forward.
Thanks very much for the question. I think a lot of the topics for the science policy panel are yet to be discussed. I think you have digested a lot of paperwork so far. So it will be a very interesting but very busy week. So a lot of things will be put on the table, and not everything will be dealt with during this week. So there will be some sort of call like, now what is the priority really, and what do we need to achieve here and now? And what are perhaps things that could be developed further in the intersessional, or maybe even after, as it's more perhaps function for the panel itself to decide upon. But I think we need to be very ambitious. And also this panel is not called for to be established and then do nothing. They gave, the member states gave us a very short timeline, like with the INC, to finish the work in 2024. That is in the anticipation that we need this science policy interface. So, we need to be then also ambitious and also expect that the panel can immediately be up and running. So as much as possible, be ready. So I think in terms of the work related processes, there's a lot of, I think, discussion around those that you certainly could engage on. And this is also the first time this is being discussed. So I would say you here follow what kind of comes out as the next sort of steps. And we had an earlier consultation also with the stakeholders through webinar to explain a bit what the kind of the landscape was halfway the intersessional, and we could always think about something similar. We also have the documentation on the relationship with key stakeholders. And I think I want to pick up what Sheila was saying, because we are proposing to kind of distinguish three roles for stakeholders. One is the contributor. Yeah, this could also be the expertise or your knowledge or perspectives. The other is the decision maker, the user. So it could be the decision maker, could be policy maker, could also be the private sector. And then the third is actually those that are impacted by the consequences of what the panel actually delivers. And, I had this also a little bit in my own notes. I think this is a prime example. And I don't think it's necessarily so clearly on the radar what these impacts might be, and who are these impacted persons. So without trying to victimize anyone here, I mean, do think, not only about these institutional arrangements and how to engage, but think also kind of what is it that you want to see changed, or what is it that you want people to understand now because it affects your future. And then finally, under some of the other discussions related to work processes, there will also be discussions a bit more on functions. There is, as you mentioned, inspiration from other panels, and there is a way of engaging with youth. So no, there are some examples in the materials there as well. So no, as you mentioned, Gio, they have a fellowship program, for example. So no, these are also things that you may want to be on the lookout intersessionally, or if the discussions are tabled here as well. Thank you.
Maybe I could just combine a bit of what Goody and Tessa said, because I think, as Tessa says, there's the part where you're, contributor of the knowledge, right? And then there's the part where you could be a user, and then the part where you're actually even using the product or producing a product and all. And so if you think of those perspectives, and that, as you say, you're many different groups, so you could influence the health actors who are coming into the process, as Goody says, but from different perspectives, right? If I think of, let's just say, for example, if this panel were to be looking at PFAS as one, right, as one harmful chemical, although it's already got its own process with the Stockholm Convention, but imagine that. So you might have among you people who are working in and studying and examining what does it mean in terms of production or in terms of the product itself. So you have a perspective there, and you have those user groups and producers who are coming in as stakeholders where you could engage, but you might have other parts of the youth group who are actually innovating on green chemicals and alternatives. And so you could be engaging with those actors in terms of what does that mean in terms of creating those markets for alternatives, because we want practical solutions out of this panel, right? So I think there are many different spaces, and you have to then figure out, because you're such a big group, you have so many points in the life cycle of the chemicals and among the sector players who are going to be coming in. And so it's actually quite a complex strategy that you have to think through if you're going to take advantage of the many different players you're going to have in just this group alone.
Thank you so much. Zuhair, would you like to comment on the intersessional period very quickly? We exceeded the time.
Yes, regarding the intersessional work, I really support all the suggestions that, given forth by the other panelists. But yeah, one thing that we also need to decide on that how we are engaging with. There are a lot of experts out there in the world. Perhaps they don't know about the process, but they have a huge potential to provide inputs, like how we're engaging with individual scientists, individual health professionals. That's a very big point, because even we bring the observers in, we have 9 major groups. We are trying our best to bring in the experts and then the knowledge we have through our representatives and the organizations. But that's what we need to have further discussion on how we want to engage, even in the process, and in also the future panel, the individual scientists and individual health professional, what is their role in the work of the panel. That's a very big thing that the intersessional work can address and come up with, like maybe an information document or something, in future, just to, inform the negotiation. And also capacity building would suggest that we had a lot of webinars, I think, that served the capacity building purposes this time in between WEG 1.2 and YCM, organized by the Secretariat, the Geneva Environment Network. We would support to keep building on that, to have more capacity building, maybe having a bit from different dimensions, health dimension, chemical waste, air pollution, so on. So those are the suggestions. And even in the future session of the WEG, the third one, I'm not sure. That's a very ambitious suggestion, but maybe I don't fear to bring that in the table, is that from some of the processes, the major groups are given some umbrella badges. For the ECOSOC, the major group for children and youth, the children and youth major group, in that process, they get some umbrella badges, which they can give to the individuals who are not part of different accredited organizations, because the major groups are literally represented by accredited organizations. We cannot nominate people to register. So if some of the major groups who have a very critical role to play, maybe indigenous, science and technology, youth, and children, women, they're given some umbrella badges like 5, 4, whatever it is. We can bring in some youth expert or women expert, the experts who are working on different dimensions of chemical waste and pollution in the discussion. That's a very good point that's a very important point that I wanted to address. Yeah, ambitious, perhaps up to the member states, to decide on that. Yeah, thank you.
All right. Yeah. Thank you, Zuhair. And just to end this point, I would like to highlight also one point regarding the intersessional period. First, we really appreciating the chance and the space with having the YCM and establishing this as a practice for the upcoming. So we really thank the Bureau, Secretariat, and the support of the civil society units to be able to conduct such in-person and hybrid meeting to also enhance the preparation for we would definitely love to have the same session, even to discuss of what went well and what could have been improved for this, and bring it forward to even more impactful participation for WEG3 in Geneva, hopefully concluding the process. I think we already talked a lot of your time. It was very interesting discussion. If we can, I must ask you first if you can get on 1 or 2 questions from the participants. Yes, yeah, online or in person. So
we can maybe ask to raise hands.
Yeah.
In person to raise hands.
Yes, if our participants have any questions, you might raise your hands and feel free. We can take them all at once and then it will be addressed accordingly. Yes, Dalia first.
Okay, thank you so much. I have one question and one comment. So my question is, there is like an official inclusion of the health sector in the panel, and I raised this because we were concerned about how the health aspect and approach is missed in some processes like the ENC process. So how can we include the health aspect into this panel? Because chemical pollution, all this fully connected with health sector. So that's my question. And the comment is about inclusivity and diversity. For the achievement of inclusivity and diversity, we must ensure the participation of the vulnerable groups. So far, there are the major groups recognized since the Rio Declaration, and women is one of these groups. Young women face diverse challenges, not only for being young people, but also for being women. And for young women, for developing countries, the situation is harder. So just to give an example, the overexposure of the female to chemical pollution and the female's unique sensitivity in metabolism, particularly during the pivotal life stage like puberty, pregnancy, lactation, and menopause, makes women more susceptible to chemical pollution. Therefore, we want to raise the necessity to include women in the panel because there are amazing young women from developing countries and developed countries with expertise, and also women from indigenous communities that belongs to the system of traditional knowledge. So we want to raise this. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Sharon, and I'm a member of the CIMG and also representing Safe Data Kenya. While we were looking at the institutional arrangements and rules of procedure for sessions of the plenary, we came across a part that was encouraging participation, but there was also a statement where you need to be qualified for you to inform the secretariat of the panel about your inputs. And I thought of it in a very practical way here in Kenya. If I can give an example, Safe Data, we are in the indigenous community in the Masai Mara at the moment, and the community there right now, through capacity building, are very aware of plastic pollution and the harmful effect of using plastics, where now even the community women are collecting plastics from the environment and using the 3 Rs, reduce, reuse, recycle. But the youth also there are also trying to find other sustainable solutions to get rid of waste chemicals in the plastic bottles themselves. But they are not aware of such panels. They don't even have the idea that it exists. How do we get to the grassroots so that these voices of the women and the youth are included in the policy making table, the youth position, the women position in this?
Thank you so much. We can take one last question if there is any. Otherwise, we can address them and have a concluding remark. Yes, please.
Hello, thank you for this space. My name is Lorena from Bolivia, and only have a punctual question or comment in case. It's very important to separate to indigenous system knowledge, or because all the people say the indigenous knowledge and local communities very so different. Is one point is very important for the communities, and is in this sense, I think it's very important to balance to traditional knowledge, because we need to promote inter-scientific dialogue as a value. We need to balance, we need to effective participating in this space. And I don't know exactly the design of the body or the making decision, but we need to sit and we need to decide together. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And now we can go back to our panelists to address these questions. We can also have their final and concluding remarks if there are not any additional feedbacks from them, and then we can close the dialogue. First, I'll go with Guri, and then Tisa, Sheila, and then Zuhair, please.
Thank you. Very good questions. First of all, and I'm not entirely sure if I can give, let's say, a satisfactory answer to all of them, but I will try. So maybe to what extent health will be addressed in the panel, and or how can we ensure that it will be addressed? I think I just checked, that's why I was on my phone, the resolution, to see whether this is kind of explicitly mentioned in the resolution, and I don't think so. It is indirectly referenced because there's this link with WHO, which actually, that part of the resolution really helped in the discussions on scope and function to get where we are today, where if you look at the objective of the panel, there's a clear link to health. And so if you really want to work towards that objective, I cannot imagine you can, achieve that if you don't include a health perspective in the panel. So if this is something that is really important, I think this is something that people should keep in mind and also point out to other delegates when you're entering into, those more detailed discussion, that you bring back this objective. If we are looking at who to identify as your experts, bring back the objective that, as far as we are now, is agreed upon. I think that is one thing. With regards to vulnerable groups, I think in different wordings, this has been addressed by a couple of people that were discussing today, also in the informal consultations. I'm not sure what is the best way to engage them. I think it is more important that their needs can be somehow expressed, and that there is a way of linking that, the real problems of those groups can be taken into account in the work of the panel. And at the same time, that once there's further thinking about the functions that have now been expressed in terms of information sharing, knowledge management, or communication and capacity building, that perspective of being able to also, provide useful products and information to vulnerable groups, those that you really want to address with the work of the panel, that can be taken into account. So that is more on the what, maybe a little bit less on the how. And to be honest, I think a similar question is how to translate to the grassroots level. I think that's basically the same kind of a consideration. And I think this is exactly what people need to consider when we are talking about what is this, a science policy interface. I think, there's the interface between policymakers and scientists going one way and also hopefully the other way. But I think there's also this interface between, theoretical knowledge and real problems on the ground. So how can we, make sure that the interface is serving those functions? And I think there's, a couple of half solutions on the table, but we need to make sure to bring them together and bring this perspective, keep this perspective on the table. Good point with regard to indigenous traditional knowledge. I'm quite sure that I will never make the right references, but they were all brought up, local knowledge as well, in the context of our discussion. And I think you're right. It is, again, an issue around this question of diversity and making sure that the different, let's say, that by making sure that you have a multidisciplinary panel that includes also different knowledge systems, that's maybe something that you could address in the principles. Then you have addressed the what, and then you need to probably think more, maybe longer down the line about the how. So, yeah.
Shall I compliment? I think Goody already covered a lot of ground. I think on the health, yes, we have a direct relationship with World Health Organization expressed in the resolution. And that has also been picked up in the World Health Assembly, whereby now WHO is asked to explore the full range of options on engaging on this process. And that could be at that higher institutional level, but it could also be at a very practical level. And what is it that we need? We need to have the understanding, and we need to have the sound data. WHO has that access. They have the networks also with experts as well. So health experts, of course, also go well beyond WHO. Second, it is going to be a discussion on prioritization, all these issues that may come to the panel. And it's very likely will be a criterion, the health impact. So this would require the health expertise to come in very much, because it's also in the objective, right, for the panel, for the protection of human health in the environment. And then maybe just, I don't think I can give such a good answer as Goody on the kind of the vulnerable groups. And I'm also now very happy to, I've been hearing that actually consistently, the point you're making about the indigenous knowledge and local communities and things not to be kind of lumped together. And it's of course also the kind of, it's about knowledge. It's not just about research. So that is really important to kind of be considered how that is taken on board. But whether in the Masamara they will know about the open-ended working group to establish a science policy process, I may wish to go myself and do some outreach, but no, I mean, IPCC was established over 30 years ago. Now people know IPCC. IPBES, how many of you know IPBES? IPBES? 2002. Okay, so not everyone. And if I test my parents, they also no, IPCC, have you heard of it? But it was established about 10 years ago, I think. No, 7, 10, 12. Okay, there you go. So in any case, the panel is not yet established. And what I hope is two things: that the findings of the panel are relevant to the people, and they will know the impact of the panel will come to the people. And vice versa as well. We need to think through a way that if there are no issues that are really on the ground, that they are not necessarily excluded from being brought to the attention of the panel. Whether they do something with it or not, that's yet other processes. But not to exclude beforehand through this design stage, now this kind of possibility. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Sheila, can you just...
Maybe just to throw this back to you, is all of you who are here, you are in a privileged position to be here. So this panel cannot sit and engage with the whole world, right? I mean, as Tessa says, it's not going to reach someone, a community person in the Mara. But if you're here as a Kenyan, or you are here as a health practitioner, or you're here as, I don't know, a green chemistry type of individual, you have your different networks. You are representing your network's position. And so, and when you hear something happening in the panel or eventually its findings, you are feeding it back. And so you have to think, that's why my earlier response was taking from what Goody and Tessa said, there are many different interjection points along the full value chain of the different chemicals. There are many different actors who you can engage with. And so you have to think, how do you bring from your networks into those networks that are part of this, and how do you take back into those? Otherwise, this panel will not manage, right? It cannot reach everyone. It has to reach it through you.
I mean, one thing that Dalia mentioned, how we can make sure that the perspectives are incorporated, especially the health you mentioned. There, I mentioned already have a suggestion for the umbrella badges. You know, we can give it to the experts who doesn't necessarily belong to the accredited organizations. As you know, the accreditation, maybe we are not supposed to discuss about the accreditation process here, but one thing that I want to, shed light on is that, with the plastics negotiation ongoing in the last quarter, we had more than 17 organizations accredited under the business and industries category, only one under the children and youth category. That shows like who are we accrediting. I have tried to go through the websites of those association. They are simply plastic manufacturing association. They don't have any work on environment. It's very easier for them to get accredited because they have a lot of money. They just do some greenwashing event in different countries. They can show, okay, as per the UNEP requirements, they say, oh, we are active in 3 countries, so we get accredited easily. But for the children and youth, it's very difficult for us to transcend the border, work in different countries. We're maybe very active in Bangladesh or in an individual country, but not active in 3-4 countries. But we're not getting accredited because we cannot fulfill the requirement. But the business and industry organizations, the plastics associations, they are increasing in numbers significantly, which is will create a lot of conflicts of interest in future, even among the major groups and stakeholders. It's alarming that we need to address. Even that will be an alarming thing for the future panel as well. That's one thing. And again, we need to decide how we're going to engage, because in the global north organizations, they don't want to engage, give accreditations and badges to the young people or any individuals. They're very rigid. We most of the time we get it from the global south. Like Olga, she's an expert. She works on the science policy interfaces. She's based in Boston, working with the university, but she doesn't represent her university here because it's very difficult to accredit universities in the UNEP process. So she had to seek accreditations from many other organizations. Luckily, we have few organizations who have good wills to provide badges to the other youths to come here, but it's not the same for other major groups, even not for us, like to bring a big delegation. So that we need to decide how we are going to more capacitating. So yeah, we are representing the huge network that's behind us. We are bringing their perspectives, but we need more power to bring their perspectives in. We need more capacities, more resources. We are lacking that, unfortunately. Thank you.
All right. So thank you so much for your concluding remarks. And again, thank you for the platform, for the space, and for making yourself available. We we talk longer time, almost half an hour, beyond the scheduled ending. Thank you once again. And yeah, it was a very pleasure to have you all. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you for